That night, my daughter-in-law slapped me across the face, and I chose to stay quiet. The next morning, I cooked a grand feast for her and my son. My son smiled and said, "Finally, Dad understands his place," until he saw who was sitting at the head of the table. If you have ever been underestimated by the people you sacrificed everything for, this story is for you. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to support this old man's journey for justice. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I did not even have time to take off my heavy wool coat before the screaming started. I had just walked into the foyer of the Beacon Hill townhouse, shaking the Boston snow off my shoulders when a thick stack of legal documents slammed onto the glass coffee table. The sound echoed through the high ceilings like a gunshot. "Sign it, Harrison." It was not Dad. It was not Mr. Caldwell. It was just Harrison spoken with the kind of venom usually reserved for a stray dog that had wandered onto the carpet. My daughter-in-law Monica stood in the center of the living room. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car, holding a glass of red wine that was dangerously close to spilling on the Persian rug I had bought 30 years ago. I looked past her to the corner of the room. My son Preston was sitting there curled up in the wingback chair. He was 42 years old, but in that moment he looked like a terrified child. He would not meet my eyes. He was staring at his shoes nervously, picking at a loose thread on his trousers. I walked slowly to the table. My knees ached from the damp cold outside, a reminder of 50 years spent on construction sites, but I kept my back straight. I picked up the document. The header was in bold black letters. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of ownership. It was a document that would strip me of my rights to this house. The house I bought in 1982. The house where I raised my son. The house where my late wife took her last breath. And they wanted me to sign it over to them for $0. I looked up at Monica. Her eyes were manic-wide with a mix of greed and desperation. "You want me to sign over my home?" I asked, my voice calm and low. "It is not your home anymore, Harrison," she snapped, stepping closer. "It is a burden. You are a burden. Look at you. You are 72 years old. You wander around this $4.5 million asset like a ghost. We need the equity. Preston needs to invest in his business. You are just sitting on a gold mine doing nothing while your family drowns. Drowns." I looked at Preston. The company I handed over to him, the construction firm I built brick by brick from the ground up, was debt-free when I retired 5 years ago. If they were drowning now, it was because they had punched holes in the hull of a perfect ship. I dropped the papers back onto the table. They slid across the glass and stopped right in front of Preston. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Simple. Absolute. Monica's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. She set her wineglass down with a shaking hand. "What did you say?" she whispered. I said no. I am not signing over my house. I am not going to a nursing home so you can liquidate my assets to fund whatever scheme you two have cooked up this week. Preston finally spoke, his voice trembling. "Dad, please. Do not be difficult. Monica is just stressed. The business is tight right now. If we can just leverage the house, we can fix everything. You do not need all this space." He sounded pathetic. My son, the man I raised to be strong, was begging me to rob myself to cover his incompetence. I took a step toward the stairs. "I am going to bed. We are done discussing this." I did not see her move. I only heard the rustle of silk and the sharp intake of breath. Monica lunged across the space between us. "You selfish old parasite," she screamed. Then it happened. Her hand connected with my cheek. It was a sharp, stinging slap that knocked my wire-rimmed glasses right off my face. They skittered across the hardwood floor and came to a rest near the fireplace. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the howling wind outside, battering the historic windows of Beacon Hill. My cheek burned, a throbbing heat that spread quickly to my ear. I stood frozen, my head turned slightly to the left from the impact. Dad Preston gasped, but he did not move. He did not stand up. He did not defend me. He just sat there in his chair, paralyzed by his wife's rage. Monica stood there, her chest heaving, her hand still raised in the air. For a second, she looked shocked by her own violence, but then the shock replaced by a sneer, a look of pure contempt. "Pick them up," she hissed, pointing at my glasses, "and then sign the papers. Stop being a stubborn old fool and help your family for once. Help my family." I slowly bent down. My joints popped audibly in the silence. I reached for my glasses. My hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice water in my veins. As I held the glasses in my calloused hand, I looked at my knuckles. They were swollen and scarred. I got that scar on my index finger in 1978, pouring the foundation for the first skyscraper my company ever built. I got the burn mark on my wrist, pulling a worker out of a site fire in '85. These hands had worked 14-hour days in freezing rain and scorching sun. These hands had signed the checks that paid for Preston's private school education. These hands had written a check for $100,000 for the wedding where Monica stood in a white dress and promised to love and cherish my son. And now these same hands were being slapped by a woman who had never worked a hard day in her life. A woman who looked at my legacy and saw only a piggy bank to be smashed open. I put my glasses back on. The world came back into focus. I saw the dust motes dancing in the light of the chandelier. I saw the fear in my son's eyes and the arrogance in my daughter-in-law's face. I could have yelled. I could have thrown them out right then and there. I still had the strength. I was old, but I was not weak. But as I looked at them, I realized that yelling would do no good. They did not respect my voice. They did not respect my history. They thought I was just a senile old man standing in the way of their payday. So I decided to become exactly what they feared most. The silent man. The man who plans. I straightened my coat. I looked Monica dead in the eye. She flinched, waiting for me to hit her back. But I did not raise a hand. "Fine," I said softly. Monica blinked, confused. "Fine what?" "Fine," I repeated, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You are right. Maybe I am too old for this house. Maybe I do not understand modern finance." A slow, victorious smile spread across her face. It was ugly. It was the smile of a predator that thinks the prey has given up. Preston let out a long breath he had been holding. "Thank you, Dad. You are making the right choice. Really, it is for the best." "I will need tonight to say goodbye to the house," I said. "Tomorrow night I want to cook a dinner, a final feast here. I want you to invite your partners, your investors. I want to sign the papers in front of everyone. I want to leave with dignity." Monica laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Oh, Harrison, you and your drama. Fine. Cook your little dinner. Just make sure the papers are signed by dessert." She turned her back on me and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself another glass of wine, as if she hadn't just assaulted her father-in-law. Preston gave me a weak nod and followed her like a puppy. I stood alone in the hallway of the house I built. My cheek was still stinging. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. They thought they had broken me. They thought the slap had put me in my place. They had no idea. I turned and walked up the stairs to my room. The silence of the house felt heavy, but it was no longer a lonely silence. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel comes down. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I dialed a number I had not called in years. "Ross," I said, when the voice on the other end answered. "Harrison, is everything okay?" "It is late. Everything is far from okay." "Ross," I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror at the red mark fading on my cheek. "I need you to clear your schedule for tomorrow. And I need you to call your friend at the federal prosecutor's office. Why, Harrison, what is going on? My children want my house, Ross. And tomorrow night, over beef Wellington and vintage wine, I am going to give it to them. But I am also going to give them something else. What is that? A lesson in morality, Ross. And a one-way ticket to reality. Bring the paperwork. Not the transfer papers. The other ones. The ones we talked about 10 years ago. The nuclear option. I hung up the phone. Outside, the snow was falling harder, burying the city in white. Tomorrow the snow would cover everything, but inside this house the truth was about to be laid bare. I touched my cheek one last time. That was the most expensive slap in history, Monica, I whispered to the empty room. And tomorrow you are going to get the bill. I woke up at 5 in the morning, just like I had every day for the last 50 years. The habit was burned into my bones deeper than the arthritis. The only difference today was the throbbing ache on the left side of my face. I walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The bruise had bloomed overnight, turning a sickly shade of purple and yellow across my cheekbone. It was a brand of shame, but as I touched it, I did not feel humiliation anymore. I felt clarity. It was the physical proof that the contract between father and son, the unspoken bond of respect, had been severed. I washed my face with cold water shaved around the bruise with the precision of a surgeon and went downstairs. The kitchen was cold. This house, this $4.5 million pile of bricks and history, always held the chill in the morning. I liked it that way. It kept you moving. I started the coffee maker, the old industrial one I had installed back in '95, and pulled the cast iron skillet from the rack. Bacon, eggs, toast. The smell of grease and coffee soon filled the air, a scent that usually meant safety and family. Today it was camouflage. I needed them to think I was just carrying on. I needed them to think I was broken enough to return to routine because I had no other options. I heard them coming down the stairs around 8. The heavy, clumsy footsteps of my son Preston, followed by the sharp, rhythmic clicking of Monica's heels. She was wearing shoes in the house again. I had asked her 1,000 times not to scuff the hardwood, but today I said nothing. I just flipped the bacon. They stopped in the doorway. I could feel their confusion radiating off them like heat. They expected to find me sulking in my room or packing a bag or calling the police. They did not expect me to be plating scrambled eggs with a calm hand. "Good morning," I said without turning around. "Coffee is hot." There was a long silence before Preston cleared his throat. It was a wet, nervous sound. "Morning, Dad." They sat at the island. I placed a plate in front of each of them. I watched Monica closely. She looked pristine. Her hair was perfectly blow-dried, her makeup flawless, hiding any trace of the monster she had been 12 hours ago. She looked at the food, then at me, and then the performance began. Her face crumpled. It was an impressive piece of acting. Her lower lip trembled and tears welled up in her eyes on command. She reached out across the marble counter and tried to take my hand. I let her. Her skin felt cold and dry. "Dad," she choked out. "Oh God, Dad, I am so sorry. I do not know what came over me last night." I stood there letting her hold my hand, my face impassive. It was just the stress, she continued, the tears now flowing freely. "The market is crashing. Preston is under so much pressure with the loans, and my hormones have been all over the place. I have not been sleeping. I feel terrible. You know I love you, right? I only want what is best for this family." Preston jumped in, eager to smooth things over. "Exactly, Dad." She was up all night crying. "We are just so worried about the future. We did not mean to hurt you." I slowly pulled my hand away and picked up my coffee mug. I took a sip, letting the silence stretch until they began to squirm. "You mentioned a plan," I said softly. "Last night. Before the unpleasantness." Monica wiped her eyes instantly, the grief vanishing as if she had flipped a switch. She sat up straighter, sensing an opening. Yes, she said, her voice taking on that slick sales pitch tone she used on clients. We have been looking into options. We realized that staying here in this big drafty house, it is dangerous for you. The stairs, the maintenance, it is too much. We found a place, Harrison. It is called Golden Horizon. She pulled a glossy brochure from her robe pocket and slid it across the counter. It is a luxury senior living community, she said, tapping a photo of smiling old people playing chess in a sunroom. It is top of the line. If we sell the house, we can pay for a platinum suite for you. $500,000 up front for a lifetime of care. You would have nurses, gourmet meals, friends your own age. You would be a king there, Dad. And with the rest of the equity, Preston and I can save the company and build a future for little Leo. It is a win-win. I looked down at the brochure. Golden Horizon. The name sounded majestic. The photos looked expensive, but I knew better. I knew exactly what Golden Horizon was. 3 years ago, before I fully retired, the developers of that facility had come to my firm. They wanted Caldwell Construction to build the complex. I had reviewed the blueprints myself. I remembered sitting in my office looking at the specs and feeling sick. They wanted to use substandard concrete. They wanted to cut corners on the fire suppression system. They wanted to use cheap insulation that was barely legal. I had thrown them out of my office. I told them I would not put my name on a death trap. They found a cheaper, less ethical contractor to do the job. And now my daughter-in-law wanted to put me inside those walls. She wanted to sell my solid Victorian home to lock me in a fire hazard made of drywall and lies, just so she could get her hands on the $4 million of equity. The rage flared in my chest, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I forced my hands to shake slightly as I held the brochure. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller, older, defeated. It looks nice, I said, my voice wavering. It is beautiful, Monica urged, her eyes gleaming. And they have a spot open right now, but we need to move fast. The market is shifting. We need to sign the transfer papers today so we can list the house by Monday. I looked at Preston. He was shoveling eggs into his mouth, avoiding my gaze. He knew. Deep down, he knew this was wrong. He knew I was capable. He knew I was healthy. But he was too weak to stand up to her. He was willing to sell his father to buy peace with his wife. I took a deep breath and let out a long, shuddering sigh. Maybe you are right, I said. I felt the tension in the room snap. They both froze. I am getting older. I continued staring into my coffee cup. My knees hurt. The roof needs repairs. I cannot do any more. Maybe it is time I stopped being stubborn. Maybe it is time I helped you. Monica let out a squeal of delight. She clapped her hands together. Oh, Harrison, you are making the right choice. You are saving us, thank you. I will call the notary. We can sign this afternoon. No, I said. Her smile faltered. No. Not this afternoon, I said, lifting my head. I want to do this right. This house. It is my legacy. It represents 40 years of my life. I do not want to sign it away on a kitchen counter with bacon grease on my fingers. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing my plate. I want a dinner, I said, turning to face them. Tonight? A farewell dinner. I want you to invite your business partners, the investors you are trying to impress. I want to sign the papers in front of them. I want to show them that the Caldwell family is united, that I am passing the torch to my son with my full blessing. I want to leave with dignity, surrounded by success. Preston looked at Monica. Is that okay? Monica was calculating. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was thinking about the optics. An official signing ceremony in front of investors would look fantastic. It would prove that Preston had the capital backing him. It would seal the deal. That is a wonderful idea, Dad, she said, beaming. A celebration. We will invite the partners. We will make it a gala." "Good," I said. "I will cook. I want to make my beef Wellington. One last meal from my kitchen." "You do not have to cook," Harrison Monica said dismissively. "We can cater." "No," I insisted. "I will cook. It is the least I can do." "Fine," she waved her hand. "Whatever makes you happy. Just be ready by 7. I nodded and walked out of the kitchen, heading back toward my room. My steps were slow and heavy, the gait of a man who had given up. But as soon as I turned the corner into the hallway, I stopped. The angle of the hallway mirror allowed me to see back into the kitchen without being seen. Monica was standing by the microwave, her phone in her hand. She was typing furiously, a smirk twisting her lips. I watched her reflection in the dark glass of the microwave door. She hit send and then held the phone up, admiring her work. The screen was bright, and from my angle the large text she had typed was perfectly legible in the reflection. It was a message to a number saved as Gavin. I knew that name. Gavin was Preston's biggest competitor, a man who had tried to bankrupt us for a decade. The message read, "The old man took the bait. He is signing tonight. Get the tickets ready. Zurich is calling my name." I stared at the reflection, memorizing the words. She wasn't just stealing the house to save Preston's company. She was stealing the house to leave him. She was going to take the money, betray my son, and run off with his rival. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a general who has just seen the enemy expose their flank. "Enjoy your victory lap, Monica," I whispered to the empty hallway. "Because tonight you are going to choke on it." I turned and walked silently up the stairs. I had a lot of work to do. I had to buy ingredients for a feast. I had to sharpen my knives. And I had to visit an old friend who knew how to bury bodies, legally speaking. The masquerade was over. Now the hunt began. I told them I needed truffles for the beef Wellington. It was a believable lie because everyone knew I took my cooking as seriously as I took my construction contracts. Truffles were hard to find and expensive, which gave me at least 2 hours of unmonitored time. I put on my heavy wool coat, buttoned it up to the chin to hide the tremors that still occasionally racked my body, and walked out the door. The cold Boston air hit me like a physical blow, but it felt good. It felt real. Inside that house, everything was a lie, but out here on the gray, slush-covered streets, the world was exactly what it appeared to be. Cold, hard, unforgiving. I did not go to the market. I drove my old Lincoln town car past the expensive grocery stores and navigated the winding, narrow streets of the North End. I parked in a spot that was technically illegal, but the beat cops in this neighborhood knew my car. They knew I had built the precinct station back in '92. They would look the other way. I walked up 3 flights of stairs in a brownstone building that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. There was no elevator. The gold lettering on the frosted glass door was peeling slightly. Ross A. Geller, attorney at law. Ross had been my friend since Vietnam, and my lawyer since I laid the first brick of Caldwell construction. He was the only man alive who knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. I pushed the door open. The office was exactly as it had been for 40 years. Walls lined with legal texts that had not been opened in a decade, a desk that looked like it could withstand a bomb blast, and Ross sitting behind it, looking like a bulldog in a 3-piece suit. He looked up when I entered, a smile forming on his face, but the smile died instantly when I stepped into the light. His eyes locked onto the left side of my face. The bruise was darker now, a blooming violet shadow against my pale skin. Ross stood up slowly. He was 70 years old, but he moved with the dangerous grace of the Marine he used to be. "Who hit you, Harrison?" he asked. His voice was low, a growl that vibrated in the quiet room. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. It groaned under my weight. I did not want to say it. Saying it made it real. Saying it meant admitting that my family was broken beyond repair. It does not matter, Ross, I said, waving my hand dismissively. It was an accident, a misunderstanding. Do not lie to me, Ross snapped, coming around the desk. I have known you for 50 years. You do not walk into doors, and you do not get into bar fights. Not anymore. Who put their hands on you? I looked at him. I saw the genuine concern in his eyes, the loyalty that I had failed to find in my own bloodline. My daughter-in-law, I whispered. Monica. Ross stopped dead. He stared at me, his jaw tightening until a muscle jumped in his cheek. He did not ask why, he did not ask for details. He simply nodded, once turned around, and walked back to his safe. He spun the dial with practiced ease. I assume we are not here to discuss assault charges, he said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. Knowing you, if you wanted her in handcuffs, she would already be there. You are here for the business. He tossed the envelope onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. I asked you to look into the company finances last week, I said, picking up the envelope. Before all this happened. I just had a bad feeling. Preston has been evasive. He keeps asking for bridge loans. I needed to know if the foundation was cracking. Ross poured 2 glasses of scotch and slid one toward me. You might want to drink that before you open the file, Harrison. The foundation is not cracking. The foundation is gone. The building is floating on thin air. I took a sip of the burning liquid and opened the clasp. I pulled out the summary sheet. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers, and my stomach dropped. I had left Preston a company with $12 million in assets and 0 debt. I had left him a machine that printed money if you just kept it oiled and running. What I was looking at now was a crime scene. $2.8 million in debt, outstanding loans to 3 different banks, vendor payments over 90 days past due. But it was the asset column that made me freeze. What is this? I asked, pointing to a line item. What is Crypto Future Holdings? Why is there $4 million listed here? Ross sighed and sat down heavily. Because your son is an idiot, Harrison. He mortgaged the heavy equipment. He leveraged the current contracts. He took almost all the liquid capital and invested it in cryptocurrency and non-fungible tokens. Digital pictures of monkeys, Harrison. He bought digital air. I stared at the paper. My hands started to shake. I had spent 40 years waking up at 4 in the morning. I had missed birthdays. I had worked through fevers and broken bones. I had built hospitals, schools, and libraries. Real things. Things you could touch. Things that sheltered people. And my son had traded it all for internet magic beans. The market crashed last month. Ross continued, his voice gentle now. The crypto is worthless. It is gone. The banks are calling in the loans. He has 30 days before they file for involuntary bankruptcy. He is drowning, Harrison. That is why they want the house. It all made sense. The desperation. The panic in Monica's eyes. The slap. They were not just greedy. They were terrified. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, and the only rope they could find was my home. But then I remembered the reflection in the microwave. I remembered Monica's text message. Zurich is calling my name. Preston is a fool, I said quietly, closing the file. He is weak and he is stupid. He destroyed my legacy because he wanted to get rich quick without doing the work. But he is not evil. He is just pathetic. I looked up at Ross. But Monica is not stupid. She knows the ship is sinking. Ross frowned. What do you mean? I saw a text message, I said. She is planning to leave him. She is pushing him to sell my house, not to save the company, but to steal the equity. She takes the $4 million from the house sale and runs. Preston gets left with the debt, the bankruptcy, and the shame. And I get left in a nursing home to rot. Ross let out a low whistle. That is cold, even for her. She is cheating on him, Ross, I said. I know it. And she is embezzling. If the company is this deep in the hole but she is buying plane tickets to Zurich, she has a stash somewhere. She has been siphoning money while Preston was busy playing with digital coins. I stood up. The pain in my cheek was throbbing, but the pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was done being the victim. I was done being the sad old man. I was Harrison Caldwell, and I had crushed tougher enemies than a greedy marketing executive with a shoe addiction. I need you to make a call, I said. Ross reached for his phone. Who do you need? The police. Not yet, I said. I need Kowalski. Ross raised an eyebrow. The private investigator. He is expensive, Harrison, and he plays dirty. I do not care about the cost, I said. And I want dirty. I want to know where Monica goes every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. She tells Preston she has client meetings, but she always comes back smelling like expensive cologne and guilt. I want pictures, Ross. I want bank statements. I want to know who she is sleeping with, and I want to know where she is hiding the money. Ross nodded, dialing the number. Consider it done. But Harrison, what are you going to do when you have the proof? I buttoned my coat. I thought about the dinner I was about to cook. I thought about the beef Wellington, the expensive wine the table set for 4. I am going to serve dinner, I said, walking to the door. And then I am going to serve justice. Get the papers ready, Ross. And call your friend at the federal prosecutor's office. Tell him to be hungry. I walked out into the cold hallway. The game had changed. They thought they were playing checkers with a senile old man. They did not realize I had been playing 3-dimensional chess since before they were born. I was going to buy the truffles now. The dinner had to be perfect. After all, it was the last meal of a condemned woman. I drove to the outskirts of the city, where the snow had turned into gray slush along the roadside. The meeting place was the parking lot of a Home Depot in Revere. It was a fitting place for a man like me. I had spent half my life in parking lots like this, loading lumber and drywall into trucks, arguing with suppliers about cement grades. Now I was here to buy something much darker than building materials. Kowalski was waiting for me in a gray sedan that blended perfectly into the line of parked cars. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain too long. He did not wave. He just unlocked the passenger door as I approached. I climbed in. The car smelled of stale coffee and heater dust. "You are not going to like this," Mr. Caldwell, Kowalski said without preamble. He did not look at me. He was staring out the windshield, watching the shoppers push their carts through the slush. "I did not come here to be liked, Kowalski," I said. "I came here for the truth. Do you have it?" He reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He handed it to me. It felt heavy in my hands. Heavier than a hammer. Heavier than a brick. I opened the clasp and slid out the stack of photographs. The first few were standard. Monica entering a high-end restaurant downtown. Monica walking into a boutique hotel. Monica getting into a black Mercedes. But it was the man in the Mercedes that made my breath catch in my throat. I knew that face. I knew the arrogance in that jawline. I knew the way he slicked his hair back. It was Gavin. Gavin Lynch. My hands tightened around the photos, crinkling the edges. Gavin was not just a stranger. He was not just a random lover. He was my enemy. 10 years ago, he had tried to drive Caldwell Construction into the ground. He had bribed building inspectors to delay my permits. He had spread rumors about my solvency. He had tried to poach my best foreman. I had beaten him then. I had crushed him in court and outbid him on the city hospital project. I thought he had crawled back into whatever hole he came from. But here he was sitting in a car with my daughter-in-law laughing. "She is sleeping with the enemy," I whispered. It was almost funny in a sick, twisted way. "Keep looking," Kowalski said, his voice flat. I flipped to the next photo. It was taken through a restaurant window. Monica and Gavin were leaning across the table. They were kissing. It was not a tentative kiss. It was passionate, possessive. The kiss of two people who had been together for a long time. But it was the next photo that made my blood run cold. They were sitting at a table with papers spread out between them. I recognized the letterhead on the documents, even from the grainy distance of the zoom lens. It was a schematic for the Golden Horizon nursing home, and next to it were flight itineraries. She is not just cheating on him, Kowalski said. She is conspiring. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. I managed to get close to their table, he said. I looked like an old man reading a newspaper. Nobody pays attention to old men, right? He pressed play. The audio was a bit scratchy at first, the background noise of silverware clinking and low chatter, but then Monica's voice cut through, clear and sharp. He is going to sign tonight, Gavin. I played the grieving daughter-in-law card. I cried. I told him we were drowning. The old fool ate it up. He is cooking us a dinner tonight to make it official. Then came Gavin's voice, smooth and oily. And Preston, does he suspect anything? Monica laughed. That sound chilled me to the bone. It was the same laugh she used when she watched reality TV shows about people ruining their lives. Preston is an idiot. He thinks selling the house is going to save his crypto investments. He has no idea the money is already earmarked for the Cayman account. As soon as the wire hits from the house sale, I am transferring $4 million to the Zurich account. And then Gavin asked, And then we fly, Monica said. First class. One way. By the time Preston realizes the money is gone, we will be skiing in the Alps. What about the old man, Gavin asked. And the kid. I closed my eyes. I did not want to hear this part, but I forced myself to listen. I needed to hear it. Harrison will be destitute, Monica said. Her voice cold and devoid of humanity. The IRS will come after Preston for the unpaid payroll taxes I hid. They will both likely end up in prison or on the street. It does not matter. They are dead weight, Gavin. And Leo, Gavin asked, What about your son? There was a pause on the recording. A long, terrible silence. Leo is resilient, Monica finally said. Preston's sister can take him. Or foster care. I cannot take a 10-year-old to Zurich, Gavin. He would cramp our style. Besides, he reminds me too much of his father. Weak. Kowalski clicked the stop button. The silence in the car was deafening. I sat there staring at the dashboard. I felt a tear roll down my bruised cheek, but it was not for me. I did not care that she called me a fool. I did not care that she was stealing my money. I had been broke before. I could handle being broke again. But Leo, my grandson, the boy who sat on my lap and learned how to drive a toy excavator, the boy who drew me pictures of skyscrapers, she was going to throw him away like garbage. She was going to leave him to the mercy of the system, just so she could sip champagne in Switzerland with my enemy. She was not just a bad wife. She was not just a thief. She was a monster. Preston was a fool, yes, fool. He had ruined my company. But he loved that boy. And I loved that boy. The sadness inside me began to harden. It calcified, turning into something heavy and dangerous. I was no longer a disappointed father. I was no longer a tired retiree. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope of cash. I handed it to Kowalski. There is a bonus in there, I said, my voice steady. For the audio. Kowalski took the money. What are you going to do, Mr. Caldwell? I looked down at the photo in my lap. The one of Monica kissing Gavin. I looked at her face, the face of the woman who had slapped me, the woman who had eaten at my table for 10 years. I am going to go home, I said. I am going to cook a beef Wellington. and I am going to make sure she never steps foot in Zurich, or anywhere else ever again. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit at my face, but I did not feel it. "You are a good man," Mr. Caldwell Kowalski called out after me. I stopped and looked back at him. My reflection was caught in the side mirror of his car. I did not look like a good man. I looked like a man who was about to burn his own house down to kill the rats inside. "No, Kowalski," I said. "I was a good man. Tonight I am something else entirely." I walked back to my car. My movements were fluid, purposeful. The aches in my joints were gone. The hesitation was gone. Monica had made a fatal error. She thought she was the predator because she was young and ruthless. She forgot that the old wolf is not old because he is lucky. He is old because he is the most dangerous thing in the woods. I started my engine. I had one more stop to make before I went home. I needed to visit the bank, not to withdraw money, but to see exactly how deep the rot went. I had a feeling that the mortgage fraud was just the tip of the iceberg, and if I was going to bury her, I needed every shovel of dirt I could find. I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the gray slush behind. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. It was the perfect time for a hunt. I touched the bruise on my face one last time. It throbbed a steady drumbeat of war. "Tonight, Monica," I whispered. "Tonight we feast. And you are the main course." I drove to the First National Bank branch on State Street, where I had kept my personal accounts since 1985. The building was an imposing structure of gray stone and brass revolving doors designed to make you feel small, and the bank feel invincible. I walked in, and the smell of old money and floor wax hit me. It was a familiar scent. I had signed the loan papers for my first excavator here. I had deposited the check for my first $1 million contract here. This place held the financial history of my life. I walked straight to the office of the branch manager, Peter Sterling. Peter was a good man, a few years younger than me, who had taken over the branch when his father retired. He smiled when he saw me, but the smile did not reach his eyes. There was a tightness in his jaw, a subtle shift in his posture that told me something was wrong before I even sat down. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "This is a surprise. We were not expecting you until next month for the CD rollover." I sat down in the plush chair opposite his desk. I kept my coat on. I was not planning on staying long. "I need to review my standing, Peter," I said. "I am thinking about making some changes to my estate planning. I want to see a full credit report and a list of all liens against the Beacon Hill property." Peter went pale. He sat down slowly, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. He licked his lips. "The Beacon Hill property," he repeated. "Harrison, are you sure you want to look at that today? Maybe we could schedule a formal review for next week." I leaned forward. The leather of the chair creaked. "Today, Peter. Now. Print it out." He typed for a few seconds, his eyes darting back and forth across the screen. The silence in the office was thick. I could hear the hum of the hard drive and the distant murmur of tellers counting cash. Finally, the printer in the corner whirred to life. Peter walked over and retrieved a stack of papers. He hesitated before handing them to me. "Harrison," he said, his voice low. "I assumed you knew. I assumed you authorized these." The signatures matched. The notary stamps were valid. "If I had known..." "Give them to me, Peter." I took the stack. The paper was warm. I put on my glasses, the ones Monica had knocked off my face less than 24 hours ago, and began to read. The first page was a summary. My eyes went straight to the bottom line, and my breath caught in my throat. $1.5 million. There were 3 separate home equity lines of credit taken out against my house in the last 8 months. The first for $500,000 in May. The second for another $500 in August. The third, just last month. I flipped the page to look at the loan applications. There was my name, Harrison J. Caldwell, listed as the borrower. And there at the bottom was my signature. It was a masterpiece of forgery. The loops of the H were perfect. The sharp slant of the C was exactly how I wrote it. To a layman or a busy bank manager, it looked authentic. But I knew my hand. I knew that when I signed my name, I pressed harder on the upstroke of the L. This signature was too light. It was drawn, not written. And there was one other detail, a detail only I would notice. The signature was slanted slightly to the right. I am left-handed. My natural slant is to the left or vertical. This was signed by a right-handed person trying to mimic my style. I looked at the co-borrower line. It was blank. But the funds had been wired to a corporate account. Who owns Shell Corporation 88 LLC? I asked, pointing to the beneficiary of the wire transfer. Peter looked at the screen. It is a holding company registered in Delaware. We did the standard KYC checks. The authorized signer is... He clicked a few keys, and his face went white. Monica Caldwell. I closed my eyes for a second. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a pile driver. Monica was not just trying to sell the house to save the company or to run away with Gavin. She needed to sell the house because if she didn't, the fraud would be discovered. She had secretly mortgaged my home to the hilt. She had stolen $1.5 million of my equity, probably to fund her lavish lifestyle, or to hide the losses Preston was racking up. If I sold the house for $4 million, the bank would take their $1.5 million off the top to pay off these secret loans. I would be left with less, but the fraud would be buried. The loans would be paid, and no one would ever look at the signatures again. But if I refused to sell, if I stayed in my house eventually, the balloon payments on these loans would come due. I would get a foreclosure notice for a debt I did not know I had, and then the investigation would start. She was desperate because she was running out of time. She had stolen my identity. She had committed bank fraud. She had committed wire fraud. These were not family squabbles. These were federal crimes. Each count carried a maximum sentence of 30 years in federal prison. She had turned my home into a crime scene. I looked up at Peter. He was sweating. "Harrison," he stammered, "I need to call legal. We need to file a suspicious activity report. If you did not sign these, we have a massive compliance failure." "Do not call anyone yet, Peter," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not yet. I need copies of everything. The applications, the wire transfer receipts, the notary attestations, everything." He nodded vigorously. "Of course. Of course." I watched him print the documents. My mind was racing. Monica had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Stealing from family was one thing, but exposing me to the risk of foreclosure, destroying my credit, stealing my good name that I had spent 70 years building, that was an act of war. She was not just a thief. She was a parasite that had burrowed so deep she was threatening to kill the host. I thought about Preston. Did he know? Did he know his wife had forged his father's signature? Or was he so lost in his digital fantasy world that he had no idea his wife was robbing his inheritance? It did not matter. Ignorance was not a defense. Peter handed me a thick manila folder. I took it and stood up. "Harrison," Peter said, standing up with me, "I am so sorry. If there is anything I can do..." "There is one thing," I said. "Do not freeze the accounts yet. Do not alert her. Let the payment for this month go through if it is set up. I want her to think she is safe for 24 more hours." Peter looked conflicted, but he nodded. "I can give you 24 hours. After that, I have to report this to the regulators. That is all I need." I walked out of the bank. The folder under my arm felt like it was burning a hole in my coat. I got back into my Lincoln and locked the doors. The interior was freezing, but I was sweating. I looked at the documents one last time. I traced the forged signature with my finger. It was a violation so intimate, so personal, it made me want to vomit. She had used my name. She had used the name my father gave me, the name I gave my son, to steal. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Ross's number. I knew what this call meant. Once I made it, there was no going back. There would be no family counseling. There would be no reconciliation. This was the nuclear option Ross had warned me about. But then I touched my cheek. It still throbbed. I remembered her sneer. I remembered the text message about Zurich. I remembered her calling me a burden. I pressed the call button. Ross answered on the first ring. "You have the pictures." "I have more than pictures, Ross," I said, staring at the stone facade of the bank. "I am at First National. Monica took out 3 second mortgages on my house. $1.5 million. She forged my signature." There was a silence on the other end, so profound I thought the call had dropped. Then Ross let out a breath that sounded like a hiss. "Jesus, Harrison. That is heavy. That is RICO territory if she moved the money across state lines. She wired it to a shell company," I said, "and she is planning to flee to Switzerland. Ross, this is not a civil suit anymore." "No," Ross said, his voice hardening into his lawyer tone. "No, it is not. Do you want me to call the precinct?" "No," I said. I looked at the Federal Deposit Insurance sticker on the bank door. "Local cops are for domestic disputes. Local cops are for shoplifters. This is a sophisticated financial crime involving a federally insured institution. Do not call the police, Ross. Call the FBI, and call your friend at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I want a federal prosecutor. I want the kind of power that does not just arrest you, but buries you." "Are you sure?" Harrison Ross asked quietly. "Once you ring that bell, you cannot unring it. She is your son's wife. She is the mother of your grandson. She is a criminal, Ross," I said. "And tonight at dinner I am going to introduce her to the consequences of her actions. Bring the prosecutor to the house. Tell him to bring a warrant. I will make the call," Ross said. 7 p.m. 7 p.m., I confirmed. I hung up the phone and started the car. The engine rumbled to life, a deep, powerful sound. I had the truffles, I had the photos, and now I had the smoking gun. I merged into traffic, heading toward the upscale butcher shop in the South End. I needed the best cut of beef tenderloin money could buy. The beef Wellington had to be perfect. The pastry had to be flaky and golden. The meat had to be tender. Because tonight was not just a dinner. It was an execution. And I was the executioner. Here is the detailed script for Scene 6 following the conflict-fed narrative style and meeting the specific requirements. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, watching the house. From the outside, it looked perfect. The brick facade was warm and inviting in the twilight, the windows glowing with golden light against the darkening sky. It looked like the kind of home where happy families lived, where grandfathers told stories by the fire and children slept safe in their beds. But I knew the truth. It was a movie set. A beautiful facade hiding a rotten structure that was about to collapse under the weight of greed and lies. I walked up the front steps, the heavy bag of groceries in one arm, the folder of evidence tucked securely inside my coat against my ribs. I unlocked the door and stepped into the heat. The air inside felt thick, stifling. It smelled of Monica's expensive potpourri, a cloying scent of dried lavender that tried to mask the underlying tension. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was the silence of people holding their breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had barely closed the door when I heard small running footsteps on the hardwood. "Grandpa." Leo came skidding around the corner from the library. My grandson, 10 years old with messy hair and eyes that saw too much. He stopped a few feet away from me, looking at my heavy coat and the bag in my arm. He looked scared. Not the kind of scared a kid gets from a bad dream, but the deep, settling anxiety of a child who knows the adults are lying to him. Hey there, sport, I said, forcing a smile onto my tired face. I put the grocery bag down on the bench. What are you doing up? Is your homework done? He didn't answer. He just walked up to me and wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face in my coat. He smelled like peanut butter and crayons. I rested my hand on his head, feeling the softness of his hair. It reminded me of Preston when he was that age before the world, and his own weakness had twisted him. Grandpa, he whispered into my wool coat. Are you leaving? I stiffened. Who told you that, Leo? Mom, he said, his voice muffled. She was on the phone. She said you were going away. She said you were going to a place for old people and you were never coming back. She said we were going on a trip without you. My heart shattered. It didn't break. It turned to dust. Monica wasn't just stealing my money. She wasn't just manipulating my son. She was actively preparing my grandson for my erasure. She was telling a 10-year-old boy that his grandfather, the man who taught him how to fish, who built him a treehouse, was being discarded like a broken toy. I pulled Leo back gently so I could look him in the eye. I crouched down, ignoring the pop in my knees, until we were face to face. Leo, look at me. I am not going anywhere. Do you understand? I am right here. He looked at me, his lower lip trembling. But she said it. She said it was a done deal. That is why... He paused, looking over his shoulder toward the living room to make sure his parents weren't listening. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a small blue booklet. It was my passport. I stole it, he whispered, shoving it into my hand. I found it in your desk. I hid it, Grandpa. If you don't have your passport, you can't go away, right? You have to stay here. I stared at the passport in my hand. Then I looked at the boy. He had committed a tiny act of rebellion, a desperate, clumsy attempt to keep his family together. He was fighting for me in the only way he knew how, while his father, my own son, sat in the other room and let his wife plan my destruction. That was the moment. That was the tipping point. Until now, part of me had been operating on anger, on the need for justice. But looking at Leo, I felt something else. A fierce, protective instinct that went back to the cavemen. Monica was a threat. She was a predator threatening my cub. And predators don't get warnings. They get eliminated. I slipped the passport into my coat pocket, next to the evidence of her crimes. You are a brave boy, Leo, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you. But you don't have to worry. Nobody is making me leave. Tonight everything is going to be fixed. I promise. Fixed, how? He asked, hopeful. I stood up, picking up the grocery bag. With a special dinner. Why don't you go upstairs and play video games for a bit? Put on your headphones. The grown-ups have boring business to talk about before we eat. He nodded, trusting me implicitly. Okay, Grandpa. I watched him run up the stairs, his footsteps light and quick. I waited until he was gone, until the sound of his door closing echoed from the second floor. Then I turned toward the living room. Preston was sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the television. He wasn't watching it. He was just letting the blue light wash over him, hiding in the noise. He held a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He looked exhausted, beaten down by life and by the woman he had married. I walked into the room. He looked up, startled, as if he had forgotten I lived there. Dad, he said, sitting up straighter. You are back. Did you get the stuff for dinner? I did, I said. I set the bag down on the floor. Preston looked at the bag, then at me. He looked away, unable to hold my gaze. Monica is upstairs getting ready, he muttered. She invited the investors. They will be here at 7. I nodded slowly. I took a step closer to him. I needed to know. I needed to give him one last chance, not to save himself from the law, but to save his soul in my eyes. Preston, I asked, my voice quiet. Are you sure about this? He swirled the whiskey in his glass. Sure about what? About selling the house. about Golden Horizon, about everything. He sighed a long, heavy sound of defeat. Dad, we talked about this. It is the only way. The company needs the capital. The company your mother and I built, I said. This house is her legacy, Preston. She picked out the wallpaper in the dining room. She planted the hydrangeas out front. Are you really okay with signing that away? Are you okay with putting me in a home? He flinched. He took a large gulp of whiskey. Stop it, Dad. Don't do that. Don't use Mom against me. It is complicated. You don't understand modern business. You don't understand the pressure I am under. Monica says this is the best option. She has a plan. She knows what she is doing. Monica says. Monica has a plan. He didn't have a single original thought left in his head. He was a hollow man, filled up with his wife's poison. He wasn't protecting the family. He was sacrificing it to save his own skin because he was too cowardly to face his failures. I looked at him and I realized I wasn't looking at my son anymore. I was looking at an accomplice. A weak, unwitting accomplice, perhaps, but an accomplice nonetheless. He was willing to sell me out. He was willing to let Leo lose his grandfather. All because it was easier than saying no to his wife. I understand perfectly, Preston, I said. My voice was cold now, devoid of the warmth I had shown Leo. I understand better than you think. I picked up the grocery bag. I will be in the kitchen, I said. Do not disturb me. This meal needs to be precise. I walked away, leaving him alone with his whiskey and his blue light. I walked down the hallway into the kitchen, the heart of the home. I unpacked the groceries, the beef tenderloin, the mushrooms, the puff pastry, the foie gras. Expensive ingredients for a very expensive lesson. I set everything out on the counter in neat rows. Mise en place. Everything in its place. Just like on a construction site. Just like in a courtroom. I walked over to the knife block and pulled out my chef's knife. It was a high-carbon steel blade, Japanese, made razor-sharp. I had taken care of it for years. I grabbed the honing steel. I stood there in the quiet kitchen and began to sharpen the knife. Shink! Shink! The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic. Steel against steel. It was the sound of preparation. The sound of a weapon being readied for war. I thought about Monica upstairs, painting her face, getting ready to play the gracious hostess while planning her escape to Zurich. I thought about Preston drowning in his drink. I thought about Leo hiding my passport. Shink! Shink! Tonight the truth would cut deeper than any blade. Tonight I would carve the rot out of this family. I would serve them a meal they would never forget. I tested the edge of the knife against my thumb. It bit into the skin, instantly drawing a tiny bead of blood. Perfect. I wiped the blade clean. It was time to cook. The guests were coming, the prosecutor was coming, and judgment was coming with them. I seared the beef tenderloin in the cast iron pan. The sound was a violent hiss, a burst of steam and smoke that smelled of iron and blood. I did not rush. I let the crust form dark and caramelized, sealing the juices inside. Cooking a beef Wellington is structural engineering. It is about layers. It is about moisture control. If you rush the foundation, the whole edifice collapses. I had learned that pouring concrete in the 80s, and I applied it to every aspect of my life. I moved the meat to a rack to rest and turned my attention to the duxelles. I had chopped the mushrooms by hand, thousands of tiny pieces, until they were almost a paste. I sautéed them with shallots and fresh thyme, watching the steam rise. You have to cook all the water out. If there is any moisture left, it makes the pastry soggy. It ruins the integrity of the structure. Patience is the only tool that works. I stirred the mixture, the wooden spoon scraping the bottom of the pan, rhythmic and steady. Behind me, I heard the click-clack of heels. Monica breezed into the kitchen. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight and too bright. The kind of dress you wear to a casino, not a family dinner. She had her phone pressed to her ear, her voice loud and grating against the quiet focus of my kitchen. "Yes, send the listing agreement over tonight," she said, pacing back and forth. "I want it live on the MLS by 8 tomorrow morning. We are pricing it at 4.8 million. Yes, he is signing the transfer tonight. It is a done deal." She did not even look at me. To her, I was just a fixture in the room like the refrigerator or the oven. I was a tool performing a function. I was making the food for her celebration. I spread the prosciutto out on a sheet of plastic wrap, overlapping the slices with mathematical precision. This was the barrier. This was the layer that protected the pastry from the meat. It had to be perfect. I listened to her lie to the real estate agent. She was selling my home before the ink was even wet on the fake papers she thought I would sign. She was carving up the carcass before the animal was even dead. "Just make sure the wire instructions are correct," she said into the phone. "I do not want any delays with the escrow. I need those funds available immediately." She hung up and finally acknowledged my presence. She walked over to the stove where a pot of chestnut soup was simmering. It was Patrice's recipe. A simple, earthy soup that tasted like winter. Monica dipped a spoon into the pot without asking. She brought it to her lips, blew on it, and tasted it. She wrinkled her nose, a look of performative disgust crossing her face. "God, Harrison," she said, dropping the spoon back into the pot with a clatter. "It is bland. Did you forget the salt? I guess your taste buds are dying along with the rest of you." She laughed, a short, cruel sound. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was a senile old cook making a mistake. I did not look up from the Wellington. I was carefully rolling the beef in the prosciutto, using the plastic wrap to tighten the cylinder. It required firm, even pressure. Too loose and it falls apart. Too tight, and you bruise the meat. "I seasoned it perfectly, Monica," I said, my voice flat. "But the soup is just the starter. You will find the main course has a very distinct flavor. It will be quite rich." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Just do not burn it. The investors will be here soon. I want everything to be impressive." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking away toward the dining room. Impressive? Yes. It would be impressive. I unrolled the puff pastry. It was cold and smooth. I brushed it with egg wash, painting the yellow liquid on with a delicate touch. I placed the meat in the center and began to fold the pastry over. This was the final layer, the facade. It would turn golden and flaky in the oven, hiding the red meat inside. It was a beautiful lie wrapping a bloody truth. Just like Monica. Just like this dinner. I scored the top of the pastry with the back of my knife, creating a decorative pattern of leaves and vines. It was unnecessary, but I did it anyway. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted her to see the beauty of it before I destroyed her world. I slid the Wellington into the oven and set the timer. 40 minutes. That was all the time left. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the dining room. The table was a long slab of mahogany that I had refinished myself 20 years ago. I opened the china cabinet. I took out Patrice's wedding china, the white porcelain with the gold rim. We only used it for Christmas and special anniversaries. Monica had asked to sell it on eBay a month ago. She said it was old-fashioned. I set the places with deliberate slowness. One place setting at the head of the table for me, one to my right for Preston, one to my left for Monica, and one at the other end of the table. I placed the heavy silver fork, the knife, the crystal wine glass. I folded the linen napkin into a sharp triangle. Monica walked in as I was lighting the candles. The room was dim, illuminated only by the flickering flames and the lights of the city outside the bay window. It looked elegant. It looked expensive. "Who is the fourth setting for?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair at the foot of the table. I lit the last candle and blew out the match. The smoke curled up into the air, a thin gray ribbon. "A special guest," I said. "Someone who is going to help us finalize the transaction." She smiled, greedy and sharp. "Oh, did you invite a notary or maybe one of Preston's angel investors?" "That is smart, Harrison. Good thinking. We should have a witness." "Yes," I said, looking at the empty chair. "A witness is exactly what we need." I walked back to the kitchen. The timer went off. I pulled the Wellington out of the oven. It was magnificent. Golden brown, glistening with fat, the smell of butter and roasted meat filling the air. It was a masterpiece. I placed it on the carving board and let it rest. You have to let it rest, or the juices run out. You have to wait. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Preston coming down the stairs, the ice clinking in his glass. I could hear Monica humming to herself, happy, victorious. They had no idea. They saw an old man cooking dinner. They did not see the architect standing in the rubble of his own life, holding a detonator. I picked up the carving knife. It was razor sharp. I had honed it until it could split a hair. I looked at my reflection in the blade. I looked tired. I looked old. But I also looked ready. I put the Wellington on the silver serving platter. I carried it into the dining room. The candles flickered as I passed. "Dinner is served," I said. Preston and Monica sat down. They looked at the food with hunger. They looked at me with expectation. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in months. "Bon appetit," I whispered. The trap was set. The bait was cooked. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. The sound was deep and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards of the dining room. It was the heartbeat of the house, a sound that had marked every birthday, every holiday, and every funeral for the last 30 years. Tonight, it sounded like a funeral bell. We were seated. The table looked magnificent. The candlelight danced off the crystal wine glasses, and the polished silver casting long flickering shadows against the damask wallpaper. The beef Wellington sat in the center of the table on a silver platter, a golden brown monument to my patience and skill. Next to it was the tureen of chestnut soup steaming gently. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat my son Preston. He was already on his second glass of the 95 Cabernet I had decanted an hour ago. He was drinking it like it was water, his hand trembling slightly every time he lifted the glass to his lips. He wore a suit that was slightly too tight around the waist, a physical manifestation of his gluttony and lack of discipline. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the centerpiece, a floral arrangement Monica had ordered that cost more than my first truck. To my left sat Monica. She was radiant in her victory. The red dress was a splash of violence against the subdued elegance of the room. She was practically vibrating with energy, her eyes darting between the empty chair at the foot of the table and the folder of documents she had placed next to her bread plate. She had not even bothered to hide them. The transfer papers were right there, waiting like a knife on the table. She picked up the bottle of wine and topped off her glass, then reached over to fill mine. Her movements were jerky, manic. "Let us make a toast," she said, lifting her glass high. The crystal caught the candlelight, fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. She looked at Preston, then at me. Her smile was wide, showing too many teeth. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "To family," she said, "and to the future. To new beginnings and making the right choices for the legacy of the Caldwell name. To the golden horizon." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had slapped me across the face less than 24 hours ago. I looked at the woman who was planning to abandon my son and grandson to run away with my enemy. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature and stolen my identity. I picked up my glass. It felt heavy in my hand. To the future, I said, my voice steady and calm, and to everyone getting exactly what they deserve. Monica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of doubt crossing her eyes, but she washed it away with a large gulp of wine. She did not understand. She thought I was resigned. She thought I was talking about karma in the abstract, the way old men do when they have lost power. She did not know I was talking about the Federal Penal Code. Preston mumbled something unintelligible into his glass and drank. "Please," I said, gesturing to the soup. "Start. The guest will be here momentarily." Monica dipped her spoon into the chestnut soup. She ate quickly, efficiently, as if she just wanted to get the meal over with so she could get to the signing. "So, Harrison," she said between spoonfuls. "This investor, this witness you invited, who is he exactly? Is he from the bank or is he a private equity man? I want to make sure I pitch the real estate value correctly." I broke a piece of crusty breadcrumbs falling onto the pristine white tablecloth. "He is a man of great authority," I said. "He specializes in finalizing difficult transactions. He has a very keen eye for detail. He does not miss anything." "That sounds promising," Monica said, nodding. "We need someone detail-oriented. The valuation of this house is tricky given the historic zoning. I have the comps ready, though. I can show him the potential." I took a sip of soup. It was rich and earthy, warming my chest. It tasted like home. It tasted like the life I was about to blow up. "I am sure you will have a lot to show him, Monica," I said. Preston put his spoon down. His face was flushed. "Dad, are you sure about this? So, we don't have to do it tonight. We could wait." Monica shot him a look that could have cut glass. "Preston, stop it. Your father has made his decision. Don't ruin this." I looked at my son. He was trying in his own weak, pathetic way to throw me a lifeline. He was feeling the guilt gnawing at his gut. But guilt without action is just cowardice. "Eat your soup, Preston," I said gently. "You are going to need your strength." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds were the clinking of spoons and the wind howling outside. The tension in the room was a physical weight pressing down on us. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, sharpening my senses. I noticed everything. The way Monica tapped her foot under the table, the sweat beading on Preston's forehead, the way the candle flame flickered in the draft. Then it happened. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, bright sound that seemed completely out of place in the heavy atmosphere of the dining room. Monica dropped her spoon. It clattered against the china bowl. She jumped up from her chair, her napkin falling to the floor. "That is him," she said, breathless. "That is the investor." Finally. She smoothed her red dress, checked her reflection in the darkened window, and put on her best saleswoman smile. "I will get it," she announced. "Stay here. I want to set the stage before he comes in." She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor of the hallway. I stayed seated. I picked up my knife and fork and cut a small piece of the beef Wellington on my plate. I put it in my mouth and chewed slowly. It was perfect. Tender, savory, the mushrooms providing a deep umami kick. I looked at Preston. He was staring at the doorway, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad. "Relax, son," I said. "The show is just starting." We heard the sound of the heavy front door being unlatched. We heard the hinges creak. And then we heard Monica's voice, bright and welcoming, the voice she used to charm clients and manipulate husbands. "Good evening. Welcome to the Caldwell Resi." Her voice cut off abruptly. It was as if someone had grabbed her throat. There was a silence in the hallway. A confused, heavy silence. Then Monica spoke again, but the charm was gone. Her voice was sharp, confused, edged with the first creeping tendrils of panic. I am sorry. Who are you? I think you have the wrong house. We are expecting a private investor." I swallowed the beef. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. I did not turn around. I just raised my voice enough to carry down the hallway, projecting it with the authority of a man who had shouted orders over the roar of jackhammers for 40 years. "There is no mistake, Monica." I heard the rustle of movement in the hall. "Please come in, Mr. Harrington," I called out. "The soup is still hot, and we have plenty of wine." I heard footsteps. Heavy, authoritative footsteps. Not the loafers of a banker, but the thick soles of men who are used to walking into places where they are not welcome. Monica backed into the dining room. She was walking backward, her eyes wide, her face draining of color until her makeup stood out like a mask. Behind her, 3 men stepped into the light of the chandelier. The man in the front was tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat over a severe black suit. He had steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a human being could tell. He held a leather briefcase in one hand. Behind him were 2 younger men. They were wearing windbreakers that didn't quite cover the bulges at their hips. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing the uniform of enforcement. Monica bumped into the sideboard and stopped trapping herself between the table and the wall. "Harrison," she stammered, looking at me wildly. "Who are these people? What is going on?" The tall man stepped forward. He didn't look at the food. He didn't look at the wine. He looked directly at Monica and then at Preston. "Monica Caldwell?" he asked. His voice was dry, professional, devoid of warmth. "Yes," she whispered. "And Preston Caldwell." Preston nodded, unable to speak. "I am Assistant United States Attorney David Harrington," the man said. He reached into his coat pocket. Monica flinched as if she expected him to pull out a gun. But he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a folded document with a blue cover. "And these," he gestured to the men behind him, "are Special Agents Miller and Jones from the Federal Bureau of Investigation." One of the agents flipped open a leather wallet. The gold shield of the FBI gleamed in the candlelight. It was a small object, but it sucked all the air out of the room. "FBI," Monica choked out. Her hands flew to her chest. "Why? Why is the FBI here?" "We haven't done anything. This is a mistake. Harrison, tell them." She looked at me, pleading. She looked at the man she had slapped, the man she had called a parasite, and she begged me to save her. I picked up my wine glass and swirled the dark red liquid. I looked at the legs running down the side of the glass. "It is not a mistake, Monica," I said. "I invited them." You invited the FBI to dinner," she screeched. Her voice was climbing an octave, cracking with hysteria. "Are you senile? Are you crazy?" "I invited them," I said, setting the glass down, "because Mr. Harrington was very interested in the loan documents you signed at First National Bank." The blood left her face so completely that for a second I thought she was going to faint. She gripped the sideboard for support. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I don't know what you are talking about," she stammered. "What loan documents? The ones for the $1.5 million in second mortgages you took out on this house," I said. "The house you don't own." Harrington stepped forward, placing the blue document on the dining table right next to the untouched bowl of soup at the empty place setting. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "we have a warrant for your arrest. And for yours, Mr. Caldwell." Preston made a sound like a wounded animal. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the floor. "Arrest," he shouted. "For what? I didn't do anything." Harrington looked at him with pity. "Bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy to commit money laundering." Monica looked at the agents, then at the door, calculating the distance. One of the agents shifted his weight, blocking her path without even moving his feet. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, trying to regain her footing, trying to be the bully she always was. "My father-in-law is confused. He gave me permission, he signed those papers, he just forgot because he is old." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the folder I had gotten from the bank. I tossed it onto the table. It landed on top of the transfer deed she had tried to force me to sign. My signature slants to the left. Monica, I said quietly, you signed them with a right-handed slant. And you pressed too hard. You always press too hard. Monica stared at the folder. She looked at Harrington. She looked at the agents. And finally, she looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The greed was gone. All that was left was the naked, ugly fear of a rat that realizes the trap has snapped shut. You, she hissed. You old bastard. You set me up. I cut another piece of beef. Sit down, Monica, I said. You haven't finished your soup, and Mr. Harrington has a lot of reading to do. She didn't sit. She stood there trembling as the reality of her life crashed down around her. The dinner party was over. The trial had begun. Harrington sat at the head of the table like a judge presiding over a tribunal. He did not touch the silver, nor did he unfold the napkin. He simply sat there, his hands clasped on the polished mahogany, watching. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the sound of my knife scraping against the china plate. I was the only one eating. I cut a perfect square of the beef Wellington, ensuring I got a bit of the pastry, the mushroom duxelle, and the tender pink meat. I put it in my mouth and chewed slowly. The flavors were impeccable. Eartha, rich, complex. It was a meal fit for a celebration, even if the only thing we were celebrating was the end of a lie. Preston was shaking. He had pushed his chair back slightly, as if trying to distance himself from the table, from his wife, from the reality crashing down on him. Monica stood frozen near the sideboard, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between the FBI agents blocking the doorway and the prosecutor sitting in her guest's chair. I swallowed and dabbed my mouth with the linen napkin. The meat is excellent, I said into the silence. It is a shame you have lost your appetites. I looked at Monica. She was glaring at me, her fear morphing back into that familiar, sharp-edged arrogance. What is this, Harrison? She hissed. Is this some kind of sick joke, you hired actors? You think you can scare me with cheap theatrics? I ignored her. I looked at Harrington, then back to my son. Preston, I said, my voice conversational. Have you ever read Title 18 of the United States Code specifically? Section 1344. Preston blinked, sweat dripping down his temple. What, number Dad? What are you talking about? It covers bank fraud, I said, cutting another piece of beef. It is quite specific. It states that anyone who knowingly executes a scheme to defraud a financial institution faces up to 30 years in federal prison. And a $1 million fine. 30 years, Preston whispered. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the thick packet of documents I had retrieved from the bank that afternoon. I did not hand them over gently. I tossed them onto the table. They landed with a heavy slap right next to Monica's untouched plate, sliding across the tablecloth until they hit her wineglass with a chime. Read them, I said. Monica stared at the papers. She did not move to touch them. Those are loan applications, Monica. I said, my voice hardening. 3 of them, totaling $1.5 million, all taken out against the equity of this house. My house. Preston looked at the papers, then at his wife. Monica, you said we were just refinancing the business loans. You said Dad agreed. I stood up. I picked up the top document and held it up to the candlelight. Look at the signature, Preston. Look closely. I pointed to the bottom line where Harrison J. Caldwell was scrawled in black ink. You grew up watching me sign report cards, Preston. You watched me sign checks for your tuition. Tell me, what do you see? Preston squinted at the paper. His hands were shaking so bad he had to brace them against the table. It looks like your signature, Dad. Look at the slant, I barked. He flinched. I am left-handed, Preston, I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. I have always been left-handed. My letters slant backward or stand straight up. I dragged my hand across the page. I thrust the paper toward him. This signature slants to the right. It flows forward. It was written by a right-handed person trying to draw my name. I turned to Monica. She was pale, her red lipstick now looking like a wound on her face. "It is a good drawing, Monica," I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. "But you pressed too hard. You always press too hard. You wanted it to look authoritative, so you dug the pen into the paper. But I don't write like that. I write with a light touch." Preston looked at his wife, horror dawning on his face. You forged it. You forged Dad's signature." Monica's face twisted. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the cornered rat underneath. She slammed her hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. "He is lying," she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He is a senile old man. He signed those papers. He sat right there in the study and signed them because he wanted to help us. Now he is forgetting. He has dementia." She looked at Harrington, her eyes wild. "You can't believe him. He is confused. He barely knows what day it is. He signed them. And now he is scared, so he is making up stories to frame me. Do not listen to him." I stood there calm in the face of her hysteria. She was doing exactly what I expected. She was attacking my mind. She was trying to strip me of my credibility, my agency, my very self. It was the ultimate betrayal. I looked at Harrington. The prosecutor slowly stood up. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin blue folder. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice deep and devoid of emotion, "we do not need to rely on your father-in-law's memory." He opened the folder and placed a photograph on the table. It was a high-resolution still from a security camera. "This is from the surveillance system at First National Bank," Harrington said. "Dated May 12th, the day the first loan was originated." In the photo, Monica was sitting at a desk across from a notary. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses on her head. She was smiling, and she was clearly, undeniably signing a document with her right hand. "And we have the forensic analysis," Harrington continued. "The FBI lab confirmed that the pressure indentations on the loan documents match samples of your handwriting seized from your office this afternoon. It is a 100% match." Monica stared at the photo. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air seemed to leave her lungs in a rush, and Harrington added, delivering the final blow. "The notary has already confessed. She identified you. She admitted you paid her $5,000 to verify a fake ID. She is in custody right now, Mrs. Caldwell, and she is very eager to make a deal." The room fell silent. The only sound was Preston's ragged breathing. He looked at the photo, then at his wife. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world dissolve into ash. "Monica," he whispered. She backed away until she hit the wall. Her eyes were wide, vacant. The arrogance was gone. The greed was gone. There was only the terrifying realization that the game was over. It was for us," she stammered, her voice thin and weak. "I did it for us, Preston." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You didn't." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Sit down, Monica," I said. "You haven't finished your soup. And you definitely haven't heard the best part yet." "You think this proves anything?" Monica spat. Her voice was shrill, slicing through the heavy silence of the dining room. She pointed a manicured finger at the surveillance photo on the table. "That could be anyone. It is blurry. And handwriting analysis is junk science. It is subjective. Any lawyer worth his salt will tear this apart in court. I did not forge anything. I have power of attorney. Preston, tell them. Tell them we discussed this." She turned to my son, her eyes wide and desperate, willing him to lie for her one last time. Preston looked up from the table. His face was gray, his eyes bloodshot and watery. He looked like a man who had been beaten with a rubber hose. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed, caught between the terror of prison and the terror of his wife. Harrison put the phone away. Monica hissed, "Stop this charade. You are embarrassing yourself. Mr. Harrington, you are making a mistake. My father-in-law is vindictive. He is upset because he is losing his mind, and we had to make hard decisions about his care. This is elder dementia manifesting as paranoia. I looked at her. It was impressive in a way. Even with the FBI standing in her dining room, even with photographic proof of her crimes staring her in the face, she was still trying to gaslight the room. She was still trying to sell the narrative that I was the problem. She was a fighter, I would give her that, but she was fighting a war that was already over. I tapped the screen of my phone. I did not look at her. I looked at the sleek wireless speaker sitting on the sideboard, the one she used to play jazz during her cocktail parties. I do not think we need to rely on handwriting analysis, Monica. I said, my voice calm and measured. And we certainly do not need to rely on my fading memory. I think we should hear it from the source. I pressed the connection button. The speaker emitted a cheerful electronic chime as it paired with my device. The sound was bright and modern, a sharp contrast to the doom hanging in the air. Monica froze. She looked at the speaker, then back at me. A flicker of true terror finally pierced her defiance. "What are you doing?" she whispered. I scrolled through my files until I found the one Kowalski had sent me. It was labeled Tuesday Lunch. "I am playing your exit interview," I said. I hit play. The sound of silverware clinking against china filled the room, amplified by the high-quality speakers. It sounded crisp and clear. Then came the ambient hum of a busy restaurant. And then Monica's voice cut through the air. It was relaxed, confident, the voice of a woman in total control. "He is going to sign tonight, Gavin." I played the grieving daughter-in-law card. I cried. I told him we were drowning. The old fool ate it up. Preston flinched as if he had been slapped. He looked at the speaker, his mouth slightly open. Then came the man's voice. "Gavin Lynch. My enemy. And Preston, does he suspect anything?" Monica's laugh echoed through the dining room. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. It bounced off the walls, mocking the man sitting to my right. "Preston is an idiot." The words hung in the air, brutal, unfiltered. "Preston is an idiot," she repeated on the recording. "He thinks selling the house is going to save his crypto investments. He has no idea the money is already earmarked for the Cayman account. As soon as the wire hits from the house sale, I am transferring $4 million to the Zurich account." In the dining room, the real Monica made a sound like a strangled cat. She lunged toward the sideboard, trying to reach the speaker, but the FBI agent stepped in her path, blocking her with a wall of muscle. "Turn it off!" she screamed. "It is fake. It is a deep fake. He used AI. Turn it off!" I did not turn it off. I turned the volume up, and then Gavin asked on the recording. And then we fly." Monica's voice purred. "First class. One way. By the time Preston realizes the money is gone, we will be skiing in the Alps." I watched my son. I watched the moment his heart broke. It was not a sudden shatter. It was a slow crumbling. He looked from the speaker to his wife, the woman he had defended against me, the woman he had chosen over his own father, the woman he had mortgaged his soul for. She called him an idiot. She was stealing the money he thought would save him. She was leaving him to face the ruin alone. The recording continued mercilessly. "What about the old man?" Gavin asked. "And the kid? Harrison will be destitute. The IRS will come after Preston for the unpaid payroll taxes I hid. They will both likely end up in prison or on the street. It does not matter. They are dead weight, Gavin." Preston let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound. He slumped forward in his chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook violently. "She was going to leave me," he choked out. His voice was muffled by his hands wet with tears and snot. "She was going to leave me in jail." Monica looked at him. There was no pity in her eyes, only disgust. "Oh, shut up, Preston," she snapped. "Stop crying. You are pathetic. That is why I did it. Because you are a weak, spineless loser who could not run a lemonade stand, let alone a construction company." I hit pause on the recording. I had heard enough. We all had. The room was silent, except for Preston's weeping. It was the sound of a man realizing his entire life was a lie. Monica stood panting, her chest heaving. She looked wild. Her hair had come loose from its perfect bun, strands falling across her face. Her red lipstick was smeared. The mask had completely fallen away. There was no more grieving daughter-in-law. There was no more devoted wife. There was only a cornered animal, vicious and terrified. She turned her eyes on me. They were black with hate. "You did this," she hissed. "You old bastard. You ruined everything." I looked at her over the rim of my wineglass. "I did not do anything, Monica," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You are the one who scurried." She let out a scream of pure primal rage. It was the sound of someone who has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. She grabbed the steak knife from her place setting. The movement was fast, blurringly fast. "You gadded me," she screamed. "You gadded me, you senile old freak." She lunged across the table. She scrambled up onto the mahogany, heedless of the china and the crystal. She was coming for me. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to silence the witness. She wanted to kill the man who had outsmarted her. Mr. Harrington shouted something unintelligible. Preston cowered, covering his head. But she never reached me. The two FBI agents moved with practiced efficiency. The one nearest to her grabbed her ankle as she tried to crawl over the centerpiece. He yanked her back hard. Monica crashed down onto the table. Her body hit the silver platter, sending the remains of the beef Wellington flying across the room. The tureen of chestnut soup overturned, flooding the pristine white tablecloth with thick brown liquid. Crystal glasses shattered, spraying red wine like blood over the wreckage. "Get off me!" she shrieked, kicking and thrashing. "Get off me!" The second agent moved in, pinning her arms behind her back. They dragged her off the table. She took the tablecloth with her, pulling everything down in a chaotic cascade of breaking glass and silverware. The candles fell and were extinguished in the soup, plunging the room into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the light from the hallway. They wrestled her to the floor. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and final. Click, click, click. I sat there amidst the ruin of my dinner. A piece of puff pastry had landed on my lap. I brushed it off gently. I picked up my wineglass, which had miraculously survived the carnage. I took a sip. Preston was on the floor on the other side of the room, having fallen out of his chair in the panic. He was curled into a ball, sobbing hysterically. Monica was face down on the Persian rug, her cheek pressed into the wool, the same way she had slapped mine. She was spitting curses, panting, struggling against the weight of the federal agents on her back. "You have the right to remain silent," Harrington said, stepping over a broken plate. His voice was calm, professional, the voice of the law restoring order to chaos. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "I do not have the right to remain silent," Monica screamed into the rug. "I have rights. This is entrapment. He recorded me without my consent. That tape is inadmissible." Harrington looked down at her. "Actually, Mrs. Caldwell, that recording was made in a public place where there is no expectation of privacy. And your boyfriend Gavin has already been picked up. He is singing like a bird. He gave us the account numbers in Zurich 20 minutes ago." Monica went limp. The fight drained out of her, leaving only the hollow shell of a criminal who had been caught. I looked at the mess. The soup staining the rug. The broken crystal. The ruined meal. It was a disaster. But it was also the most satisfying dinner I had ever hosted. I looked at Harrington. "I apologize for the mess," I said. "I assume you have enough evidence now." Harrington nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "More than enough, Mr. Caldwell. More than enough." He signaled to the agents. Get her up. They hauled Monica to her feet. She looked small now. The red dress was stained with soup. Her hair was a disaster. She looked at me one last time as they dragged her toward the door. You are my father, she whispered, her voice cracking. How could you do this? We are family. I stood up slowly. I walked around the debris on the floor until I was standing right in front of her. I looked into her eyes. I saw the fear. I saw the manipulation still trying to work its way out even now. I wiped a speck of sauce from my lip. Family does not steal, I said. Family does not lie. And family certainly does not strike the hand that feeds them. I leaned in close so only she could hear me. You slapped me, Monica. I took it. I let you have your moment. But you were not just hitting me. You were hitting my legacy. You were hitting a grandson's future. And for that I do not serve forgiveness. I straightened up and looked at the agents. Take the trash out, I said. They pushed her forward. She began to scream again, cursing my name, cursing Preston, cursing the world. Her voice faded as they dragged her down the hallway and out into the cold night. I turned back to the room. Preston was still on the floor, weeping. The dining room was destroyed. My family was destroyed. But the rot was gone. The tumor had been cut out. It was messy and it was painful, but the patient would survive. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair where a man of integrity sits. I sat back down. I was not done yet. I still had a son to deal with. And I had a grandson upstairs who needed to know that the monsters were gone. The agents hauled Monica toward the foyer, and the fight had left her, but the venom remained. As the cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, she twisted her head back to look at us. Her face contorted into a mask of pure ugliness that was not the face of the socialite she pretended to be, but the face of a street brawler. You are all pathetic, she screamed, spittle flying from her lips, landing on the expensive wallpaper she had picked out 6 months ago. I carried this family. I did the dirty work while you two sat around playing house. You owe me, you hear me, Harrison. You owe me for tolerating your boring stories and your smell of old age. She thrashed against the agents, kicking out at the antique umbrella stand, sending it crashing to the floor. And you, Preston, she shrieked, looking at her husband, who was still huddled on the dining room floor. You spineless worm! You let him do this to me. I should have left you years ago. I should have taken the money and run the day we met. It was a torrent of filth, a raw sewage of hate spilling out now that the facade was shattered. And she cursed the house, she cursed my wife's memory, and she cursed the day she married into the Caldwell name. It was clarifying to hear it stripped away any lingering doubt I might have had, because this was who she was, and this was the woman who had been sleeping down the hall from me. I turned away from her screeching and looked down at the floor, where Preston was moving, crawling on his hands and knees, navigating through the broken glass and spilled soup toward me. He looked like a broken man, his suit ruined, stained with the wreckage of the dinner, his face wet with tears and sweat. He reached my legs and grabbed the hem of my trousers, his grip desperate and terrified. Dad, he sobbed. Dad, please, you have to help me. You have to tell them. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I did not know, Dad. I swear to God, I did not know she was forging signatures. I did not know about the loans. I thought she was just handling the business. I thought she was smart. You cannot let them take me to jail. I am your son. He buried his face against my leg, weeping uncontrollably, begging me to save him, claiming his innocence. I looked down at him, feeling a phantom ache in my chest, where my heart used to be, remembering him as a boy running into my arms when I came home from a job site, remembering teaching him to ride a bike, remembering the pride I felt when he graduated college. But then I remembered the silence in the kitchen this morning. I remembered him sitting there drinking whiskey while his wife plotted to put me in a home. I remembered him watching her slap me and doing nothing. I reached down and peeled his fingers off my trousers one by one and stepped back, creating a distance between us that felt like miles. "Stand up, Preston," I said, my voice hard, the voice I used when I had to fire a foreman for stealing materials. "Stand up." He scrambled to his feet, swaying unsteadily, wiping his nose with the back of his hand, waiting for me to fix it, waiting for Daddy to make the bad men go away. "You say you did not know," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And maybe that is true. Maybe you were too drunk or too lazy or too stupid to ask where the money was coming from. Maybe you really believed that the fairy godmother was paying the bills." Preston nodded vigorously, hope kindling in his eyes, saying yes, exactly. "I was just blind, Dad." "Ignorance is not a defense, Preston," I said, cutting him off. "It is an indictment. You ran a company into the ground because you did not pay attention. You let your wife rob your father because you did not want to ask hard questions." I stepped closer to him. "Being stupid is not a crime, son, but being a coward is. You watched her slap me. You watched her plan to throw me away, and you said nothing. You drank your whiskey, and you let it happen, because it was easier than fighting her." The hope died in his eyes, replaced by a cold dawn of understanding, as he whispered, "Dad." "You are fired, Preston," I said. "As of this moment, you are no longer the CEO of Caldwell Construction. You are no longer an employee. Your access cards will be deactivated in the morning. The company accounts are frozen." He gasped as if I had punched him, asking what he would do. "You will grow up," I said. "You will find a job. You will learn what a dollar actually weighs when you have to earn it." I pointed to the door where Harrington was waiting. "And regarding the federal charges, I suggest you find a lawyer, a good one, and you will pay for him yourself. I am not spending a dime of my hard-earned money to defend your negligence." Preston stared at me, looking like a man who had been cast out into the wilderness, opening his mouth to beg again, but something in my face stopped him. Because he saw the wall I had built, he saw that the bank of Harrison Caldwell was closed forever. From the hallway, the sound of scuffling grew louder as the agents were dragging Monica out the front door, and she had stopped cursing and started bargaining. But now, as the cold night air hit her, she realized it was over, and panic took hold again. She dug her heels into the floor mat, twisting her body around to look at me one last time, her eyes wild and feral. "You will regret this," she screamed, her voice echoing through the open door. "You are an old man, Harrison, who is going to take care of you when you are sick, who is going to change your diapers. You need us. You are going to die alone." The agents pushed her through the doorway, but I walked forward, stepping over the threshold onto the porch, where the wind whipped my coat around my legs and snowflakes landed on my face, cooling the skin where she had slapped me. I looked at her, framed by the flashing red and blue lights of the FBI vehicles parked at the curb. "Who will take care of me?" I asked, my voice carrying over the wind. I reached into my pocket and patted the thick leather wallet there. "My money will take care of me, Monica. I can hire the best nurses in Boston. I can hire staff who treat me with respect because I pay them, not because they are waiting for me to die." She stared at me, her mouth open. "And as for dying alone," I added, "I would rather die alone in a house built on truth than live in a crowded house built on lies." I looked at the agent holding her arm and told him to get her out of here. "Good luck with the prison food, Monica," I called out as they shoved her into the back of the sedan. "I hear the beef Wellington is terrible." The agent slammed the car door, shutting off her scream. I stood on the porch for a moment, watching as the engines roared to life and the lights flashed, reflecting off the snowbanks, while a neighbor across the street pulled back a curtain to watch. Let them watch, let them see that the Caldwell house cleans its own mess. The cars pulled away, disappearing down the slushy street, and the sirens wailed once, a short, sharp sound, and then faded into the distance. Silence returned to Beacon Hill, the wind whistling through the bare trees, the streetlights humming. I turned around and walked back into my house, closing the heavy oak door and locking it, with the sound of the deadbolt sliding home being the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I walked back into the dining room, which was a wreck with wine staining the rug. glass glittering in the candlelight, and the smell of cooling beef and expensive perfume hanging in the air. And there, in the middle of it all, was Preston sitting on the floor, hugging his knees, rocking back and forth, weeping soft, pathetic sobs that sounded like a child who had lost his mother in a grocery store. I looked at him and I felt pity, yes, but I also felt relief, because the cancer was gone, the surgery was over, and now the recovery could begin. I did not comfort him, I did not tell him it would be okay, because I did not know if it would be. That was up to him now. I walked past him, stepping carefully over the debris, because I had one more stop to make. I had to go upstairs. I had a 10-year-old boy waiting for me, and he needed to know that the bad people were gone, and that his grandfather was never, ever leaving. The smell of wet concrete is better than any cologne money can buy. It is the scent of progress. It is the scent of permanence. I stood on the scaffolding looking down at the foundation of the new community center in South Boston. The wind was whipping off the harbor, smelling of salt and diesel, but I did not feel the cold. I felt alive. 6 months ago, I was a ghost haunting my own life, waiting to be put out to pasture. Today, I am the CEO of Caldwell Construction again. I am the first one on site at 5 in the morning, and the last one to leave when the lights go out. I watched the mixer truck backing in the reverse beep cutting through the morning air. I signaled the foreman, a man named Miller, who I had hired back the day after I fired my son. Miller had been let go by Preston because he was too expensive. I hired him back because he knows how to pour a slab that will last 100 years. We are not building crypto farms anymore. We are not chasing digital ghosts. We are building real things with steel and stone. The debt is being paid down. The reputation is being scrubbed clean. It is hard work. It is exhausting, and I love every second of it. I took a day off last week. It was the only day I have missed in 6 months. I put on my best suit and went to the federal courthouse. I sat in the back row. I watched Monica walk in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big. Her hair was dull, her roots showing gray. She looked at the gallery searching for a friendly face, but there were none. Gavin had taken a plea deal months ago, throwing her under the bus to save his own skin. He got 3 years in a minimum security camp. Monica did not get a deal. The judge, a stern woman who reminded me of my 3rd-grade teacher, looked at the evidence. She looked at the forged signatures. She looked at the wire transfers to shell companies. She listened to the recording of Monica calling her husband dead weight. 12 years, the judge said. Federal prison. No parole. Monica screamed. She had to be dragged out of the courtroom just like she was dragged out of my house. She looked at me as she passed. There was no hate left in her eyes, only a vast, empty terror. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched her go. It was not vengeance. It was sanitation. The trash had been taken out. And Preston, my son, the boy I tried to protect from the world. He is learning about the world now the hard way. I did not bail him out. I did not hire him a lawyer. He had to use a public defender. Because he claimed ignorance and cooperated fully, he avoided prison time, but he did not avoid the consequences. He works at a logistics warehouse now over in Chelsea. He loads trucks on the night shift. He lifts boxes for $15 an hour. He lives in a studio apartment that makes my old rented room look like a palace. He calls me sometimes. He sounds tired. He sounds humble. Last week he asked if he could borrow $50 for groceries. I told him no. It was the hardest no I have ever said, but it was the most necessary. I told him that payday is on Friday and he would have to figure it out until then. He cried a little, but he figured it out. He is learning the lesson at 42 that he should have learned at 12. You eat what you kill. You sleep in the bed you make. I checked my watch. It was 3 o'clock. Time to go. I handed my hard hat to Miller and walked to my truck. It is a new truck, a Ford F-350 heavy duty. I traded in the Lincoln. I needed a vehicle that could work. I drove to the elementary school. The bell rang just as I pulled up. A sea of children flooded out, but I only saw one. Leo. He saw my truck and ran toward me, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders. He climbed into the passenger seat, breathless and smiling. "Did you bring the glue, Grandpa?" he asked before the door was even closed. I tapped the pocket of my work jacket. "Wood glue. High grade." "Just like you asked." He pumped his fist. "Yes. Today we finished the roof. We drove home. Not to a cold house filled with secrets, but to a home. We set up in the library, which used to be Monica's staging area for her social climbing. Now it is a workshop. The expensive rugs are rolled up. The table is covered in balsa wood and blueprints. We are building a model house, a replica of the one we live in. We have been working on it for 3 months. I am teaching him how to read the plans. I am teaching him how to measure twice and cut once." Leo focused on the tiny shingles, his tongue sticking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. "He has my hands. He has Patrice's focus." "Grandpa," he said, not looking up. "Dad called me yesterday." I stopped sanding a piece of wood. "Oh. What did he say?" "He said he misses me. He said he is sorry. He asked if he could come see me." The court had given me full custody. Preston had visitation rights, but only supervised and only if I agreed. He had lost his son because he chose his wife over his father, and then lost everything. "What do you want to do, Leo?" I asked. Leo put down the glue. He looked at me. His eyes were old for a 10-year-old. They had seen his mother arrested. They had seen his father crumble. "Not yet," he said quietly. He sounded sad but sure. "He needs to work more, Grandpa. He is not ready." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You are right, Sport. He is not ready." I looked at my grandson, and I made a vow right then and there. I had failed Preston by making his life too easy. I had sheltered him until he was soft. I would not do that to Leo. I would love him. I would protect him. But I would teach him to be iron. I would teach him that dignity is not something you buy, it is something you build. I would teach him that nobody, absolutely nobody, gets to slap a Caldwell and walk away. We worked until the sun went down. We finished the roof. It was solid. It was straight. "Go wash up, Leo," I said. "I will order pizza." He ran upstairs. I cleaned up the wood shavings. I walked into the kitchen. It was quiet, but it was a good quiet, a peaceful quiet. I opened the wine fridge. There was one bottle left of the 95 Cabernet, the one I had opened on the night of the arrest. It had been corked and saved. I poured a glass. I walked over to the mantel where a framed photo of Patrice sat. She was smiling that secret smile she had when she knew I was up to something. I raised the glass to her. The wine was dark and rich, like blood, like earth. I whispered to the photo, using the nickname only she knew. It was a hell of a mess. But I cleaned it up. I cleaned it all up. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, leaving only the glow from the hallway. I could hear Leo singing in the shower upstairs. I could hear the wind outside. I was 72 years old. I was alone in a big house, but I was not lonely. I was the guardian at the gate, and the gate was holding. The most expensive lesson I learned at 72 is that unlimited generosity does not create gratitude. It breeds monsters. I thought I was shielding my son, but I was actually stripping him of the ability to stand on his own. Family is defined by respect and integrity, not just bloodline. When you allow relatives to trample your dignity in the name of family, you are an accomplice to evil. Sometimes the greatest act of fatherly love isn't giving more but coldly saying no to teach the necessary weight of responsibility. Never let your sacrifice become a weapon used against you. If this story of justice and awakening resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it. Have you ever had to ruthlessly cut off a toxic family member to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments below. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next haunting real-life story. Thank you for your support.